I never thought a single letter could change my life forever. That Tuesday morning, the envelope arrived like a whisper from a world I had never belonged to. Thick cream, colored paper, embossed in gold, to the rightful heir of the Davenport estate. My hands trembled as I tore it open. The words inside seemed simple, yet they hit me with the force of a hurricane. My billionaire grandfather, a man I barely knew, and who had always seemed like a myth in my childhood, had left me his entire estate, worth a staggering $3. $8 billion. For years I had grown up on the outskirts of the Davenport name. My parents had resented him, never spoken of him kindly, painting him as cold, distant, and uncaring. I had always believed them, believing that I had been born into insignificance, meant to watch from the sidelines as others. Wealthy, powerful, and untouchable controlled the world. And yet here I was, holding proof that the man had trusted me more than my own family. Shock mingled with a strange, unsteady exhilaration. I wanted to scream, cry, laugh, and yet all I could do was stare at the letter, rereading each line as though it held a secret I had missed. The letter hinted at conditions, but none that seemed impossible. It was a simple message with a monumental meaning. I was the heir. I was the one chosen. The reality of it hit hardest when I first stepped into the Davenport estate. Towering pillars, polished marble floors, and priceless art lined the hallways, each piece whispering tales of power, legacy, and secrets. I could almost feel my grandfather's presence in the grand rooms, his unseen eyes observing me, approving my first steps into this world he had built. But peace was fleeting. My mind could not escape the truth that this inheritance would awaken greed. I could feel it already, the invisible gaze of family members who had always underestimated me. My mother and uncle, consumed by entitlement, had spent a lifetime plotting to claim what they believed should have been theirs. The estate, the fortune, the power, they had all been denied to me for reasons I had never questioned before. A fire ignited in my chest, equal parts anger and resolve. I realized that the inheritance was not just wealth. It was an opportunity for justice, for setting right the wrongs that had defined my childhood. I would no longer be the ignored, overlooked grandchild. They had underestimated me, and that mistake would be theirs to regret. As I wandered through the halls, the weight of the future pressed down on me. The path ahead was uncertain, shadowed with betrayal and ambition. But one thing was clear. This was the beginning of a reckoning, and I would not be defeated. It didn't take long for the vultures to appear. My mother, the woman I had always trusted, arrived at my doorstep a week later, her eyes brimming with tears. Or so I was supposed to believe. She embraced me tightly, her voice trembling as she whispered, "Sweetheart, this inheritance, it's dangerous. You don't understand what you've inherited. Your uncle, your relatives, they might try to take it from you." For a fleeting moment, I almost let myself believe her. I almost let her arms shield me from the storm that I felt brewing. But deep inside, a small, insistent voice warned me. Something was wrong. I remembered every lie, every whispered secret, every time she had dismissed me, ignored me, or minimized my existence. The warmth in her hug felt hollow, a mask carefully worn over years of manipulation and greed. And then the truth slipped. Almost accidentally, almost carelessly, she revealed the plan she had helped orchestrate with my uncle. Secret meetings with lawyers to declare me unfit, manipulations of my grandfather's advisers, schemes to divert the inheritance, even attempts to plant seeds of doubt about my capability in the family name. Their ambition had no boundaries, their betrayal no limits. I felt my chest tighten, a storm of rage and hurt flooding my senses. My mother, my own mother, had plotted behind my back, scheming for wealth, for status, for power, while I had been left in the shadows, unworthy of trust or love. It wasn't just money they had tried to steal, it was me. The realization shattered something fragile inside me, yet it also ignited a fire I had never known. I spent nights poring over my grandfather's journals, his meticulous records, and the legal documents surrounding the estate. Every line painted a portrait of a man who had known exactly what he was doing. He had deliberately chosen me, the quiet grandchild, the one overlooked and underestimated, as his heir. I discovered hidden trusts, offshore accounts, and legal protections designed to secure the inheritance no matter what my relatives attempted. It was more than wealth. It was a weapon, a shield, and a promise of justice. I realized then that I had a choice: remain a pawn in their schemes, allow their betrayal to define me, or rise above it. The quiet, overlooked child could become a force they never anticipated. Every smile they had faked at family gatherings, every whisper behind closed doors, every lie they had spun, it was now fuel for the plan forming in my mind. This inheritance was not just money. It was power, opportunity, and, most importantly, a chance for reckoning. And I would not waste it. Revenge, I realized, was an art. A slow, deliberate masterpiece, not a moment of reckless impulse. I watched my mother and uncle with patience, letting their greed blind them. Every subtle step they took, every attempt to probe the estate, every whispered conversation about me and my supposed weaknesses, I observed it all, and I smiled quietly to myself, knowing that the quiet ones, the overlooked ones, are always the most dangerous. I began laying the groundwork. I scrutinized the estate's finances, its hidden assets, and legal loopholes. Every betrayal they had ever plotted against me became a blueprint for their own downfall. Friends who had turned against me were subtly exposed. Allies who had whispered lies were carefully unmasked. I let them make their moves, thinking they were clever, thinking I was naive, and I let their arrogance guide them straight into the traps I had constructed. It was not about cruelty. It was about justice. I remembered the look of entitlement on my mother's face, the arrogance of my uncle, the years of dismissive smirks when I was ignored or belittled. They had underestimated me for a lifetime, believing that being quiet, invisible, and overlooked meant weakness. But I had learned, I had watched, and now the tables were turning. Each legal maneuver, each financial disclosure, each carefully planted rumor was a small, precise step toward dismantling the power they had relied on for so long. My mother tried to manipulate me with feigned concern and tears, her words designed to stir guilt. I let her speak, nodded, even showed what appeared to be hesitation, but it was only part of the performance. She could not see the storm brewing behind my calm eyes. When the dominoes began to fall, it was methodical and complete. My uncle, once brimming with confidence, found himself exposed, his schemes crumbling. Investments he had hidden, deals he had manipulated, all turned against him. My mother, despite her attempts at remorse, could not escape the consequences of her greed. The world began to see them as I had always known them to be, flawed, fragile, and painfully human. And through it all, I stood unshaken, the quiet heir no longer invisible, the overlooked grandchild no longer powerless. Revenge, I discovered, is sweetest not when it burns, but when it is executed with precision, patience, and inevitability. I had taken everything they tried to take from me, not through force, but through strategy, intelligence, and the unyielding strength my grandfather had instilled in me. Even without realizing it, by the time the dust settled, the estate, the fortune, and the power were mine entirely. And yet the most satisfying victory was watching the family I had once trusted crumble under the weight of their own betrayals, learning what it truly meant to underestimate someone who had nothing left to lose. The aftermath was quiet, almost surreal. The storm of betrayal, greed, and deceit had passed, leaving a landscape reshaped by my own hands. The estate, the fortune, and the power my grandfather had entrusted to me were fully mine. But more than that, I had claimed something far greater, my sense of self, my strength, and the knowledge that I would never again be underestimated. Walking through the grand halls of the Davenport estate, I could feel the weight of the legacy that had been entrusted to me. Each step echoed with memories both of the family who had betrayed me and of the grandfather who had silently prepared me for this life. I thought of him often, imagining the quiet pride he must have felt in choosing me, the overlooked grandchild who had finally stepped into the role he had always known I could fulfill. I had learned many lessons from the betrayals. My mother's tears and my uncle's frustration were no longer wounds, they were reminders of the power of resilience, patience, and foresight. I realized that blood does not guarantee loyalty, that love does not always shield you, and that the people who claim to care the most can sometimes cause the deepest pain. Yet, through it all, I had discovered my own capacity for calm strength, for strategy, and for controlled vengeance. The estate became more than a home. It became a symbol of transformation. Investments, charitable endeavors, and business ventures followed, all carefully planned and executed with the wisdom my grandfather had left behind. Allies and friends were chosen not for convenience or family ties, but for loyalty, integrity, and shared vision. Slowly, I began to build a world where trust was earned, not assumed. And though the scars of betrayal remained, they no longer haunted me. My mother and uncle, once so powerful in their deceit, had been stripped of their influence, left to confront the consequences of their actions. I felt no joy in their suffering, only the quiet satisfaction that justice had been served, that the wrongs done to me had been addressed not with anger alone, but with precision and resilience. Standing on the balcony overlooking the sprawling estate, the first light of dawn spilling over the mountains, I felt a sense of peace that had once seemed impossible. I understood, finally, that true power is not measured by wealth alone, but by the ability to rise above betrayal, to protect oneself, and to forge a future unshaken by those who seek to harm you. The world lay before me, full of opportunity, and I stepped forward with the confidence of someone who had survived the storm, and emerged stronger, wiser, and entirely unstoppable. This was not just my inheritance, it was my destiny, and I would shape it on my own terms.